Welcome to the show. Today, I'm going to talk about a couple subjects that are pretty near and dear to my heart. The first one I'm going to talk about is incident response. I'm going to go over some of the best practices, some of the issues that we're seeing in incident response now, as well as take you on a tour of the dark web. I want you to be able to understand what the dark web is, what are the tools that you use to access it, how do you stay safe, the do's and don'ts, roads of the world. I'm also going to go over a couple other topics. For instance, IT security versus cybersecurity. I think there's a lot of stuff that we can impact as part of that. The second one I want to focus on is the top 8 lessons learned from incident responses. Been through hundreds over my career. The company I'm with right now has gone over hundreds and since they've been around. So there's a lot of information to pull from. Now, backup strategies for success. We're going to go over what does that mean and what kind of backup strategy you want to have. We're going to do some EDR analysis. What matters? What are some of the kind of different functional areas of an endpoint detection and response tool set that you want to be focused on? It's not telling which one's the best. I'm not going to sit here and try to pitch you and tell you which EDR product you ought to purchase. I'm just going to go over some of the different areas that should be important to you as criteria for evaluation. Now, the dark web tour across the globe, I'm going to talk about sock puppets. Sock puppets are fake identities or research accounts that's used for us to get on the dark web. We either have to negotiate with threat actors, or we have to be able to do a number of different things from a research perspective to see what vulnerabilities and also what sensitive accounts are being sold on different forums. You can't do that with saying, here I am, Joshua Nicholson. They would trace you to your family. They would harass your family. It would not be good. So there's several reasons we use sock puppets. Now, VPN services is another technology that helps us do some anonymity before going on the dark web. So I'm going to show you some free VPN services, how you want to make sure you don't have what's called DNS leaks that just robs your anonymity. And then we're going to talk about Tor Onion routing and Tor Onion browser, the different circuits, as well as Tor bridges. The last section we're going to go over is what good cyber looks like. Now, we go over some PowerShell security hardening. I give some examples of PowerShell techniques attackers use, and then technical depth and business alignment. I also want to talk about wrong methodology. You're going to see where I show you a methodology that I see make horrible problems for us in the future, and I think you ought to avoid. Now, how does it all come together? I'm going to go over security operations, run books, playbooks. How did that kind of work? I'm going to give you an overall graph or business process diagram that just shows you how the pieces and parts of cybersecurity work together. How do they plug in together? And it's just demonstrative. Then I'm going to talk about metrics that matter, MTTD. This is important to me. I see this all the time with different MDR providers that provide 24/7 monitoring of endpoint detection and response tools. Now, they use a lot of different terms and SLAs and response times, and I go over that architecture. Now, one thing I never really went over on this podcast very much is a lot of my background, but this was important. This is a presentation I gave at the IC Squared monthly meeting. So I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana, born and raised. I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina around 2012. I have been in cybersecurity for nearly 24 years. I'm mostly primarily focused on incident response, security engineering. I served as senior delivery executive. I oversaw multiple complex enterprise accounts. So my background is really on that enterprise side. An example, I run cybersecurity operations many years ago for Bristol Myers Squibb during the pandemic, during one of the most difficult times in our nation's history. I serve primarily as an incident response commander. So what an incident commander is, during major incidents and events, you provide that strategic counsel to senior executives, board members, and so forth. You help make decisions on what to shut down that could have impacts of millions of dollars. Your job is to run highly technical teams and to be able to communicate to their management team in order to have the best outcome. Now, part of my specialty really lies on being a SOC leader, specializing in a hybrid delivery approach where you're combining managed detection and response 24/7 with on-site incident response teams. Now, coming up from my background, I spent 5 years active duty in the Marines. I started off at Northrop Grumman afterward as a sysadmin. Started my cybersecurity career at Hancock Bank in New Orleans. So did about 7 years with them. Phenomenal group of people down at Whitney Bank. Cybersecurity consulting in EY. So I was a manager for EY, moved me to Charlotte, told me I was going to do a lot of work in Charlotte. That never happened. I was on a plane for 2+ years, no, about 2 years. And I got a wealth of experience, did a lot of work on Wall Street in New York and in California. Then had to get off the road. So I moved over to Wells Fargo here in Charlotte. I was the vice president and group information security officer for consumer lending division. I had credit cards, mortgage, and car loans. Before going to before going over to Booz Allen Hamilton, at Booz Allen Hamilton, we were on not on the government side, we were on the commercial side. Had to build managed detection response, incident response for a lot of large customers before we spun out into a new company called Deep Seas. So there's a number of us from the managed detection response team called MTS, and we spun out into a new company called Deep Seas. And with Deep Seas, I handled service delivery, the VCISO team, incident response, was also a member of the senior management team until about 4 months ago, where one of our major partners, Surefire Cyber, and we're doing so much business together, it made sense. But I moved over to Surefire Cyber, and I am the incident response director for advisory, retainers, and resiliency. So that is a phenomenal company. If you're not familiar with Surefire, sporting the shirt here. If you're not familiar with us, please go Google us, check us out on surefirecyber.com. But we're focused really on that incident response market. And that's pretty much all we do. We focus on that. We have a lot of insurance companies, a lot of brokerages that we work with, and our business is doing nothing but exploding, and we are hiring every month. Now, before we get into this episode, I want to go over what's going to happen on the next one. I'll give you a prelim to that. So you see on episode 36, we have open source intelligence collection, reconnaissance, and footprinting. I always thought it was really important for those who are not truly highly technical, more risk management focused, GRC focused, to at least understand OSINT and understand what kind of footprint and OPSEC that you have within your environment. Where are we leaking out information? Where are areas we should clean up and not have so much information out in public? We're going to go over what's active and passive collection. We're going to do some target reconnaissance. What's footprinting? We're going to do some OPSEC, as well as Google hacking and dorking. I love Google hacking and dorking. You always ask yourself why they keep finding these secure shell keys out on GitHub and these different repositories. You just Google search for those private SSH keys, and you'll be surprised with public websites, social media, always a good area to be able to pull information about a target. Now, if you look over on the right here, that's what this episode is: cybersecurity, battlefield insights, incident response, and dark web safety. These are the QR codes toward that. And I really appreciate everybody can follow us on YouTube. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, about 5 or 6 other platforms as well. Amazon, you could just go to Amazon app, and we're on Amazon Music. Now, this is the cybersecurity landscape. Now, this is where we see it confuses so many different people. This is the sea of different tool sets that provide security to do something within our ecosystem. Really difficult to figure out what tools you need, what's your approach, and how should you handle that. Now, one of the areas I think is really important to go over is IT security versus cybersecurity. Now, we recognize the maintaining a true partnership and cross-integration with customers and service provide critical operations to success for a cyber defense mission. So we talk about customers all the time, and it's not just, you want to have that customer mentality, even if you're at a company, you're working at a company for itself. You want to treat the rest of the company, the other departments, as customers because you are providing a service to them. If you stay in that mentality, you're going to do well. So when you focus on threat protection, for instance, that first box, that's cybersecurity. We do threat intelligence. You work on what's threat detection, phishing, exploits, malware, credential phishing. You do threat response for containment and response. I can't tell you how many times I've seen where companies went to contain a threat on a machine and end up locking themselves out of it. I've seen them use conditional access groups and lock themselves out of Azure and have to call Microsoft for emergency access. Now, threat hunting, you got advanced actors. They stay low and they're slow and they hide in anomalous traffic. It takes a real concerted effort to be able to find those threats. Now, as you move down the pyramid, you get to that next one. We want to IT security, and we want to focus on cyber resiliency. This is a team that focuses on resource privilege management, secure configuration management, network resource segmentation, security controls management. That's what's your standards, what's your audits, what's your certifications, and security training and awareness. It's not just policies, procedures, but you also want to have that training. How do you institutionalize that within your organization? Now, information technology as that third, that bottom pillar on the triangle. That's where your network management, your routers, switches are come from, compute storage on-prem or on cloud, workplace enablement, either desktop devices, collaboration, even mobile devices now. And then business continuity, disaster recovery. That's one of the biggest, most critical items when it comes to incident response because it plays into your ability to recover. Now, one of the things that was important about this episode is how do we focus on some of the lessons learned from a lot of these different incidents. If you look at Surefire does about 60 incidents a month. So we got and been doing that for several years now. So we got good experience of what's happening and what's not. My prior job over at Deep Seas as well, a lot of the same trends. Now, number one, that area is that Azure AD migration tripwires. I see this happen a lot. There's a rush to move to O365. It's a rush to use online services and then just provide logon authentication that's already seamless, that everybody has username and password already. So they want to be able to move that architecture to the cloud. Easier said than done, and you definitely want to make sure you do it in the right way. Some of the keys there are those are security components are missing or overlooked. For instance, there is a connector that connects your onload domain controller to your cloud, your Azure cloud, the ADS. Now, you want to have that run on a member server. You don't want to have that run on a domain controller. So there's a lot that you want to focus on there. I'm not going to go too detailed on each area here. I'll give you some high level, and then later on in another episode, I'm going to drill into each one of them. Rush to the cloud for authentication infrastructure. We were just talking about MFA still from universally deployed. I see this as common. Every intrusion seems to have MFA not universally employed. Some component, some service, some logon ID, something didn't have MFA and they got hit. Now, the second thing we talk about, firewalls getting breached regularly. Now, it used to be you'd have a firewall, then you'd have a VPN concentrator, and there were separate devices. Almost now, that never gets done. You have the firewall VPN combination. So you would use a primary firewall to also be your user VPN platform. Now, all major firewall vendors have experienced security issues. Fortinet, ASA, Checkpoint, you name it, they've had an issue, and they do to this day. Those major attacks that you see across the board, a lot of them target these firewalls. Now, secure configuration management practices are usually not followed. We're seeing this still as well. We see operating systems that are built that are not hardened. Excessive permission. We have services running that should be shut down. We're still not hardening machines before they roll out. Patch management, change review process is usually immature. They pretty much just a list of saying these are patches that are going out. There is real no discussion on coverage and accountability and so forth. So we just see a real poor patch management process a lot of the times. Then we move into the third column, and that's that PowerShell lockdown. So I'm going to go over some things like restrictions that are not enabled. Attackers can run freely. I'm going to go over some of that in a later slide here. What are those restrictions and how you lock that down? We're seeing logging not turned on by default. If you have events, you have commands that are being issued in PowerShell and we don't have logging, we have no idea to find out what happened. That seems to happen a lot. There's some configuration management that can help turn that on. And then logging configuration needed to code base 64. So what will happen is you have an easy way to circumvent security or obfuscate things in security is by taking your commands and base 64 encoding them. And when you do that, you break different security tools because they don't unpack the base 64 and have that true command that it can process. So we'll go over some of that as well. When that event comes back and it's still base 64, the SIM's not going to see, it's not going to read, it's never going to alert. Now, consider using digital certificates to sign and verify scripts. We see this as well. You wouldn't have an attacker be able to drop a malicious PowerShell in an environment if you're configured that only signed PowerShell scripts are allowed to execute. So that's always something to look at. Now, the fourth column and the fourth item we want to focus on is new technology threats to detection. Of course, artificial intelligence, forensics artifacts, model compromises. How do you manipulate these models in order to have an output that is beneficial to you? We'll talk about DNS over HTTP, risks and issues. If some of you haven't noticed this, but you have what's called DOH or DOT, DNS over HTTP, And one of it, what that is essentially, normally you would have your DNS traffic, your port 53 name resolution traffic would use the local DNS servers in order to resolve the names such as like CNN.com, Yahoo.com, anything like that, to resolve it to its IP address. Modern browsers now, Firefox, Chrome, a lot of them had the option, but now a lot of them are turning on by default, in which they tunnel the DNS traffic over HTTP to the provider. That cuts out any data you're going to have for hunting that's now in the provider, and you have no control over where your machines and how name resolution is happening in your environment. Now, Firefox and Chrome are not the only browsers looking to do this, so you definitely want to see what your browser supports and how you're configured. IPv6, there's a lot of different vulnerabilities at IPv6, even at the DNS spoofing level. If you don't need it, it's just best to turn it off. Just use IP4 and then you NAT translate to the internet. No need to have IP6 unless you're in some big organization and there's a specific use case for it. I would avoid it at all costs. All right, so number 5, remote access solutions being abused. Now, RDP is used extensively, should only be turned on in a JIT methodology, just-in-time methodology. So we see this a lot. For some reason, people still open up RDP to the internet. They don't have all MFA on it. They don't have a lot of the security controls. Real bad idea to do that. A lot of people are scanning for open RDP all the time. We see these get popped. Just in time is having a process in order to allow access and to spin an RDP service up when administrative access is necessary and turn it off when you don't need it. So that service's attack space is much less if you have JIT security controls in place. Now, supply chain compromises continue. MSP remote management products and services are perfect targets. Why try to drop malware on a host? Why try to compromise a system if you could just use the remote access tools that are built in and designed to work on all the hosts perfectly? Always use the IT tools there. It makes it look like a regular user, and you don't get alerted and flagged on a lot of different malware that you might need to download. 6th pillar is configuration drift and technology debt. So cloud change management is chaotic. There's not real strong structure on that. A lot of things happen dynamically. I saw one incident where a person took a server and allocated an outside IP address in Azure. And before you knew it, it was exposed to the internet, RDP to the internet. And that was a configuration in cloud. In the old days, I used to have to take a server or take a network cable, put it on the outside switch, on the outside interface on the firewall. I'd have to assign it an IP address that's in that non-1918 address space there. So a globally routed address, and I would mark that off on the spreadsheet, configure that, and that's how we put something outside completely on the internet. Now you don't have to do anything. It's a click of the button in Azure and the workflow management does it. So very powerful cloud, very dangerous at the same time. All right, a lot of older systems still out there in production. We see that a lot. Several older machines that are no longer making patches or they're no longer systems. There should be an area to contain. I remember when I was at Whitney Bank, even at Wells Fargo, when they did mergers and acquisitions, they didn't always get rid of all the old technology debt and systems that were there. There was always this thought that they may need to get into that old system. It had some records and some data. So you end up putting it off to the side and it never goes away. 6 years later, it's still sitting in some back closet somewhere and it's on the network and it's a threat. It's a risk. Privileged access mismanagement, excessively high user roles and permissions. I see that a lot. To get things working, they put them in a lot of different groups. I see admins not following best practices, like checking email with a domain admin account. No privileged access should even touch the internet or a mailbox. If it does touch the internet, it's to download a patch to a very specific system. It should go nowhere else from there. But we're still seeing the abuse of that. There should always be 2 accounts. One regular account for that person to check their email, surf the internet, has no admin rights to the desktop. It's just there for that purposes. And then there's a step-up authentication or a checkout process you want to do with a PIM system, privileged identity management, something like a CyberArk where you check out admin IDs, or you make those admin IDs checked out in some other type of process. You do access reviews. They're just not being conducted the way you would think they're doing. Bosses are asking, do you still have this access? Do you still have this need? They're just not being done. Azure rules are extensive, not well used in most environments. Most people don't even know what all the Azure rules are. There's tons of them, and they don't have groups like they did in Active Directory. These are called roles. Another thing that you definitely want to focus on is enabling lapse. You want to prevent that lateral movement through pass the hash attacks. Now, what is lapse? It's local admin password synchronization tool. So what happens in a large environment? Let's say you have 1,000 machines and they compromise that local machine. The first thing they're going to do is dump the LSAS process and try to get the NTLM hashes that are running in memory. Once you have those, if they have the NTLM hash for that local admin account, and you've made the local admin account standard on all your desktops to be the same. Now that they have that hash, they don't need to crack the password. They already have the key, the hash itself. They pass that as they connect to the machines that are to them, and the other machines accept that is a legitimate key for them. So if you're able to compromise one desktop, you're able to compromise all of them if you're having the same local admin password. We don't want to do that. We want to have something separate. At my time at Avondale, I remember the Avondale ship systems. And what we used to do is take the host name with a combination of a password in the beginning and a combination of some other standard at the end of it. And that was the password for that local admin. But really hard to do with thousands of machines. It's not even feasible doing it that way. Now the lapse service is really pretty easy to install. It will handle the synchronization of different admin passwords on those environments. And it's probably the number one key item to stop ransomware. You need admin rights to run ransomware. You need to be able to go lateral movement. If you can't do that because you can't do pass the hacks, it just reduces the significance of it or the probability of it a lot. Now, changing technology threats to detection, number 8, that's where we talked about IPv6. Don't need it, turn it off. There are a lot of vulnerabilities just at the protocol level, and it's really complicated for a lot of people, especially if they're trying to do IPv6 permits on a firewall. It gets much more complicated versus normally just using IPv4 with your 65,000 ports that are available. Now, generative AI, there's several different models and things out there. I really want to focus on privileged data going into them, using sensitive data. You could see someone from finance going, you know what, I don't want to try and calculate all these numbers. Let me just throw it to ChatGPT and see what happens. And that has privacy and leak concerns from it. Protocol tunneling and then virtualization and thin clients is one of the last areas. Now, this is one of my favorite to go over because it helps me to reinforce master the 3-2-1 rule. And what is the 3-2-1 rule? If y'all remember Colonial Pipeline, 2021, Colonial Pipe was all over the news. It impacted us here at Charlotte. Caused us not to be able to get gasoline. It really was a big hit. The ransom attack was the largest cybersecurity attack to target an oil infrastructure in the United States history. So May 7th, the DarkSide Group deployed ransomware on the organization's computerized equipment that managed the pipeline. So this was their OT environment. The Colonial Pipeline CEO revealed DarkSide's attack vector as a single compromised password to an active VPN account that was no longer used. If you recall, when I went back over those top 8 things that we're seeing in incidents, VPN and MFA were right there. Here's an example of both of those being popped and used in this compromise. Now, when you look at the top 10 protection practices, prompt systems upgrades and patching. We know that's something you definitely want to make sure that's best practice. You need to stay up with that. They find vulnerabilities in software versions all the time. You want to implement zero trust model. If you don't know what zero trust is, it's pretty much having authorization, authentication on every step of the communication. It's really a framework, little too detailed to go over in this episode. Network segmentation, it's the same as having watertight doors on the Titanic. So if you have one area of the ship that gets compromised, you're able to segment that ship off and prevent water from filling into the other compartments. The same concept here. You want to be able to segment the network. If there's intrusion, that intruder, if they went lateral, would only have access to a small set of the systems and not to the entire environment. Endpoint MDR, not even a legitimate use now to have just antivirus on your machine without having endpoint managed detection and response or an EDR tool is definitely not best practice anymore. You want to make sure you have a capability that is monitoring your system, can contain it, and do that in a 24/7 model. Then rapid eradication and recovery. It's always important to be able to image systems, put them back to a hardened state, ensure data is covered, and then recover quickly and fast. What you'll notice in most big investigations, there is a preservation we want to do. We want to ensure we have all the forensics data. We want to figure out what happens. Really fast after that, you have to move into recovery and eradication and then recovery and reimage that system and get it back into production as quickly as possible. So you don't have a lot of time, especially in enterprises. You got to be able to determine what's going on and then recover and reimage as quickly as possible. Immutable and indelible storage. You want to make sure your backups are safe. We see several ransomware actors will encrypt your backups. They're going to go after your backup system. That is what prevents them from getting paid. If everything is encrypted and they're holding you hostage and you have it on a backup tape, you're not going to pay them. So they want to make sure they take that out. Regular testing and validation. It's one thing to have an intrusion detection system. It's one thing to test it to make sure that it works. Same way you would do it a fire alarm, the same way you would do with smoke detectors. You need to have that regular testing and that validation. Then number 9 has got to be one of the biggest, educate employees here. When you say that, no, I'm not going to buy you a gift card, and no, I didn't send out a link, please click that on your local phone. There needs to be some education on what the local threats, the latest threats are, and how should they stay safe. And then cybersecurity playbooks. So cybersecurity playbooks are always very important. You got to be able to know what your actions will be in a certain situation, and you'll be able to execute it as quickly as possible. Now, real quick, the master 3-2-1 rule, what is it? You have the first one, three different types of data. I'm sorry, 3 different copies of data. You want to have 2 different media types, one of which is off-site. You can have that at a data center, cloud, or on tape. And then one is offline. So it's not accessible, it's offline, it's stored somewhere else. And then the 3-2-1-1-0 rule here is that 0 is no errors after backup recoverability verification, which I see a lot of companies may do the 3 copies of data. That's common. The 2 different types of media, sometimes. You have something going to tape and some are going to disk. One of which is offsite. Yeah, that goes to a data center. Usually will replicate to 2 data centers, or they'll put it at some other location. Offline, sometimes, we did that at Whitney Bank. You would see those types would go offline to another physical location in the event you need to restore it. And this last one, errors backup recovery verification, I almost never see. I never see them testing the backups, never try to restore data to make sure it works, not try to say, hey, these 4 servers just got encrypted by ransomware. Let's test if we can restore and get them back. This almost never happens, and that's probably the biggest thing we want to make sure does happen. All right, so EDR analysis. If you look here from the left, spam filtering, email, known rogue websites, unknown rogue websites, spam filtering, web filtering. That was the solution that we used for that. That's the one that is, in many cases, the one we've relied on the most in the past. And then you move over to the right from a protection perspective, you have legacy AV. Now, legacy AV is really good for known malware, sometimes unknown malware like zero-day attacks as well. Legacy AV does help some fileless attacks, and it does help with some of the exploits that you will see. As we move more over to the right, after legacy AV, they went to next-gen AV. And then after next-gen AV, you see them going to EDR, endpoint detection and response. This is where we took, where you're doing antivirus, you're looking at files, you're looking at different websites you're going to, but now we need to look at exploits, and now we need to look at how do we manage that system when it does get hit? How do we put it in quarantine, allow us to do incident response and forensics, but not have to physically grab the machine and unplug it, and so forth. We need to be able to do all that remotely. So the endpoint detection response solutions, EDR market, is defined as solutions that record and store endpoint system level behaviors. Use various data analytics techniques to detect suspicious system behavior. Now, EDR solutions must provide the following 4 primary capabilities. Now, they detect security incidents, they contain the incident at the endpoint, they investigate security incidents, and then provide remediation guidance. Now, if you're looking for different places to find out what are the best ones, which ones should I review, definitely just go to Gartner. I'm going to go over some analysis here in a minute. You also open an EDR to look at. Now, on this screen, some of you on the audio podcast side, listening on Spotify, on Apple, might not be able to see this, so I'll go over some of these criteria. But on this presentation, on this slide, I have a list of EDR vendors, and the criteria, the functional criteria that they use starts off with behavioral detection, automated remediation, vulnerability monitoring, device control, analyst workflow, guided investigations, threat intelligence feed integration, custom rules, advanced threat hunting, and then rogue device discovery. Now, this chart shows checks and pluses and so forth for the products that cover these areas, but I want to focus just on what do I feel is important in an EDR product. Now, at Deep Seas, they manage 5 to 6 different EDR products, from your SentinelOnes to CrowdStrike, Microsoft, Carbon Black, and so forth. Some have different pros and cons. From a managed detection and response perspective, SentinelOne is really good. You can automate things really quickly and fast and push them out. Where products like Carbon Black, really noisy, a lot of tuning, you can't automate and push a lot of stuff out. You need to work with their team on their back end to deploy different instances. So there's always pros and cons to them. Some of the criteria that I find is the most important are these 3 that I got highlighted. Vulnerability management. I always like having vulnerability management tied into it. It prevents me from having to have another product, another tool, another system. And it's usually just a license upgrade for it. It's not like you're going to use that for all vulnerability management in the organization, but it definitely helps to tie that in. I also like the custom rules, star packs within SentinelOne. It can get a little pricey as you go up on the number of star packs. Other ones don't charge you for that, but the ability to create custom rules, or some EDR products that don't really allow that unless you buy a special license. When you look at the next one, is rogue device discovery. Multiple incidents have I been on now where they had EDR in place, but the system that got hit did not have it on it, was not fully deployed. You can rely on your change management and your discovery process and to discover these machines that don't have it, but it seems to happen a lot. They put machines out there, it doesn't have the customer image, or it came from some lab and they decided to save some money and not put EDR on the machines that are on the lab, and they end up getting hit, and they use lateral movement from there to cause havoc. So rogue device discovery says, hey, I see this other Windows machine here and it doesn't seem to have my agent on it. Alert. And that's something that can help you manage your infrastructure. This just goes over some of it. Like if you go to the previous one, esecurityplanet.com is where I got a lot of this data. If you want to do some analysis between different EDR products, I definitely would go there and do that. This just kind of shows you some of the grading points they give for detection, response, management, deployment, ease of use, value, and support. Those are always things you want to worry about when you're choosing an EDR provider. How good are they detecting things? How can you respond? And what's the workflow management? All the way up to deployment. If it's really hard to deploy the agents and configure them, that's always something to worry about. So I covered a lot there in incident response. And the next phase of this presentation, I want to move into the dark web tour. I need to give some interest in the dark web. What is it? What isn't it? And go from there. This is what everybody really thinks dark web is: drugs. On the screen here, I got moon rocks online I could buy for $680. You got Adderall, you got heroin, Percocet, Black Mamba Kush online. We got crystal meth for $750. And we got fentanyl sold as a liquid and powder for sale for $860. Looks like there's a sale. It used to be $1,000. Now it's $860. So this is what everybody thinks when they think the dark web. Now, this is real. I pulled this data about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. Used the Tor browser up ahead, up at the top. You can see where it is a long string of characters followed by a .onion. Those are dark web sites that use .onion. And that's where this is what most people think. Now, when we say, confused all the time, what is the regular internet? What is the deep web? What is the dark web? And what does it all mean? All right, so this is an example on the deeper. So this is what I wanted to focus on, just explaining what is the surface web, What is deep web? What is dark web? Now, you see the surface web. It's called the clear web. It's the internet as you know it. It's when you use a search engine such as Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo, news sites, social media, online stores, blogs, forums, personal websites. That all makes up the internet as you generally know it. Now, they use encryption for different websites, so encryption is not the key to if it's on the surface web or if it's somewhere else. Now, that next layer down is called the deep web. Now, the deep web is not accessible to surface web crawlers. So, the way Google, the way Bing, why they work is they crawl the internet looking for more information, they index it, and they provide it as a searchable asset within the website. So, you can go to google.com, you can type in Cybersecurity America podcast, and it will show you the website, provide you a link, you click on it, and you're able to see the podcast's website. Now, on the dark web, having VPN or some other strong authentication and security allows you access to medical records, legal documents, scientific reports, government resources, academic information, and so forth. Pretty much everything that runs the world. Now, VPNs with MFAs are used extensively in this area. They do a lot of private SaaS applications that have exploded, dissolving the perimeter. For the most part, the perimeter no longer exists. The perimeter is the user. Used to be that networks and firewalls were the perimeter. Now with cloud and applications that go everywhere that require internet access, the perimeter is now the person. It's no longer the network or the firewall. It's the user. So that identity has become the new perimeter instead of firewalls. Now, we've had an explosion in work from home, and that has opened the attack surface significantly. When you go home, you're connecting to a Wi-Fi that also has probably 4 other machines that are on it, from your kid's laptop to their mobile phone to the Xbox to the Roku that you have, all on that same Wi-Fi network. So it leaves you exposed. Now, when you're at home, you go to surf the internet, you no longer have proxy services or any of that other stuff that you normally would have within corporate environment. So it does make you a lot more exposed to the cyber threats that are out there today. The crown jewels of our organization are primary targets, and they are in that deep web. Now, the dark web. Okay, so let's get on to the dark web. It's only accessible through certain browsers, such as Tor browser, proxy chains, a number of different tool sets. It's used for drug trafficking, private communication, political protests, illegal information, and it's also used for a lot of good purposes, which I'm going to go over later. Now, some of the bad purposes used to hide stolen data, to anonymously communicate with the hostage after a ransomware or data exfiltration attack. It's a black market for drug trafficking, illegal weapons, malware, stolen credit cards, sex trafficking, and it's for unblocking news and religion as well. Now, when they talk about communicating with a threat actor, that's essentially what my company does. So Surefire Cyber does what's called TA comms, or threat actor communication. Someone has got to talk to this threat actor after they've stolen your data and they're in the dark web. So we have to go into the dark web as well, and to be able to privately communicate with a different identity in order to be able to negotiate a settlement that's probably in the millions in order to be able to get data back or to get suppression. There is a real art and a science to it. Now, what is on the dark web from a cybersecurity perspective? Okay, I saw earlier where there's a lot of different drugs that are out there. I know credit cards can be out there, but what is one of it from a cybersecurity perspective really is the initial access brokers. So these are different sites that you could go to where people are selling access. You have one here, for instance, an actor on the Russian language XSS crime forum is selling RDP access to the domain controller of an unnamed large bank in a tier 1 EU country. He did not show any proof of access or elaborate on the identity of the bank. So you have different people are selling different things. Here's another one. An actor on the same crime forum was selling domain admins RDP access to a US-based manufacturer with $978.8 million in revenue for $6,000. The victim remains unidentified. So they're not going to identify the victim until you pay. So this is where they're selling access. It's real easy now to steal someone's credentials and go sell it somewhere than it is to actually execute the cybercrime yourself. I don't have to attack a system. I don't have to find vulnerability. I don't have to steal data. I don't have to ransom and go back and forth. All I do is steal credentials and I sell it on this forum. And I'm just one small part in this whole economy of crime. Now, if you want to learn more intelligence services here, Surefire Cyber has an intelligence site. Go to the website, you can find that. But I also like and highly recommend the Deep Seas. They have a monthly threat intelligence roll up that they do. You can always go to www.deepseas.com/learn, and you can get a lot more free intelligence. Now, this is just another example of what we see on the market. We see that there is these PayPal accounts, and this guy, Mr. Robot, for instance, he bought 5 PayPal accounts. All of them are valid with decent amount of money in most of them. He used 2 of them for the moment and was able to bypass PayPal's OTP when doing payments. So on the dark web, just like on a normal crime forum, your reputation is everything. Now, here's some other websites that you can see, dark web websites. Western News can bypass oppressive governments, filtering through Tor, providing anonymous data drop-off sites for whistleblowers. So you see in this picture here, you got a secure drop-off location. It's a .onion site. So if you're a whistleblower or you want to leak something to the press or whatever that is, you can go and find these different organizations. So Bloomberg, BBC, CNN, Financial Times, New York Times, BuzzFeed, The Guardian, they all have servers on the dark web. And the reason is to provide anonymity, but also to provide news for people that are being filtered, such as in China. China does not allow access to Western news. So in order for them to find out what's going on, they route through the dark web to do that. Now, as we move over to the right, here's some other onion search sites that you can use that helps you navigate through the dark web. You have to remember that you have to know where these sites are to go to. You just can't type it into a Google type thing and find it. You can to an extent with DuckDuckGo for those sites that want to register in it, but a lot of places that have criminality on it isn't widely advertised. You need to know where to find these places. That's what makes it so difficult. Now, what is a sock puppet? And what are some of the best practices? So sock puppets are created to isolate OSINT research, that's open source intelligence research, ensuring a separation between the personal and work lives of investigators. It's essential to emphasize the importance of separating an investigator's real identity from their research accounts, otherwise known as practicing good operational security or OPSEC. One of the things here is that when we're negotiating with threat actors, we don't want them to know who we are in the world. They want to know who our children are and our families so they can harass them because we won't pay or we're stopping a ransomware payment to them. So it's very important to keep our identities secure. Now, what I have here, these are platforms that don't require registration, allow users to generate a random email address. You're going to need that when you're on the dark web. You have to stand up different accounts. Everything pretty much is email based. So you want to use some of these anonymous email providers, a lot of them that are on the dark web. You also want to provide an AI fake profile picture. Here's a website is handy here, is thispersondoesnotexist.com. And what it does is you see on the right, you have gender, age, ethnicity, and I can create my own profile. So if I want to create a white male from 19 to 25 years old, it will take thousands of images of people's faces around the world and creates an AI rendering, combination rendering that doesn't exist. There's no human in the world that has that face. And so it takes a conglomeration of all these different faces. So this one on the right, if I was to image search this on Google, he's not going to show up on a JCPenney catalog or some magazine or something that just proved that this person wasn't real because I just snipped it from the internet. It won't show up anywhere. Now, how do you pay in the dark world? You got private virtual credit cards. We have Bitcoin tumbling as well. When you go to pay for different things, let's just say it's something that if the server was compromised and you didn't want that activity traced back to you, if you used Bitcoin that you bought from, I don't know, Coinbase, for instance, once they bust that criminal on the dark web, they're going to have all the Bitcoin that he in his wallet that was used. They can trace that back to your wallet, especially if it's Coinbase where you have a driver's license you had to give them in order to have an account. So a lot of actors use tumbling. They will tumble that Bitcoin. It's the same as money laundering. You take your Bitcoin that you bought, you sell it to someone else for a fee, and they sell you Bitcoin that is a completely different number, is matched to a completely different wallet. Then, of course, fake name generators. How do I create names and how do I create whole families when I need to be able to do this? So here on the screen, unfortunately, everybody on the audio podcast won't be able to see this, but I have three pictures. I have a little girl as number one. I have an African American female as number two, and I have a white male as number three. Potentially looks a little Middle Eastern. Now, all three of these, I had a live audience. I asked when everyone pick which one's fake. And for the most part, everyone picked number three as being fake. And I picked this image on purpose because of its distortion. You can see up here on the top of the hat that it's all distorted, it's cut off. He's got this hair that's put on the front brow. It doesn't look like the generative AI model did a really good job creating this one. And so everyone gravitated to that one being fake. The girl in the middle got the most votes for being true. And the little girl on the left was what everybody thought was fake as well. All three of them are. Now, the African American woman in the middle fooled me. If I would have had to guess, that looked like a real picture and a real person. This person doesn't exist, also gives you access to body types. So you can create different body types. You don't want to have your sock puppet be skinny, fat, whatever. You can really go crazy with this. How do I create names? You have this website for a fake name generator. So I can pick the ethnicity that I want and then the name range, and it's going to spit out a name and an address and so forth. Now, I tried out several of these and it's hit and miss. Some right address, right everything. And then some is completely off. It would not pass the sniff test. I'll give you one, for instance. I did an identity. I was doing a family tree and it had one identity where it had a woman, a mother of four, and she was a plumbing inspector for the last 20 years. I don't know about you. I just don't know too many mothers of four that are plumbing inspectors for 20 years. It just doesn't sound right. This has got a societal, something's not right about that. The same way, if you look at this account I have on the screen, Donald Bigham, it says he's a disc jockey and an ambulance attendant. Okay, is that possible? Sure, but a lot of information down here. UPS tracking number, Western Union, MTCN. So when you do this kind of work, you want to make sure that this makes sense. And if somebody was to start researching the identity you're putting together, that address really does exist. That person really does live there. And a lot of this can check out if they start to investigate. Here's a Sims family generator. This one's where you don't have to be very creative. They will make you your home family for you. And you can see the names just randomly here. I thought it was funny. You create your sock puppet and it says imaginary nationality. So for instance, you have Hobbit, Klingon, or Ninja. So I have no idea what a Hobbit family, a Klingon family is going to be and so forth. So it's interesting. But they also had some really cool tools here as well. So a credit card ACH generation and validation. If you want to know if a credit card number is real, you can go to these validators. It'll tell you if that's a real number. It'll tell you if it's a real routing number. We also have national IDs, if this is a real social security number, UK number as well. Now, what are some of the best practices when you're creating that managed research or managing your research account? Number one is appear as a regular user. Avoid suspicious behavior when setting up your account. Don't reuse any personal accounts. Don't reuse an email account you want to because it's easier to check it there than it is. You want complete segmentation. You want to ensure the account blends in with the intended audience. If you're going to target a cybersecurity person to phish them to get access to the credentials, to the access to the network they're providing, you want to look like you're in the role or in LinkedIn and have a persona that should be talking to someone like that. You want to use a VPN before Tor routing, and you want to check for DNS leakage. I'm going to go over that in a second. Essentially, I would use a VPN. I go into Canada or some other place in the United States and then enter the Tor network. And the reason for that is those Tor circuits, and I'm going to go over in a minute, can be unreliable. You're on Tor, all of a sudden you get disconnected. You're going to a site, and all of a sudden your true IP address is exposed because it fell. If that happens, you want it to come back to the IP address of the VPN, not to your home network. I'm going to go over DNS leakage. This is essentially when DNS queries use the local IP provider instead of using the VPN's IP addresses that are provided. Now, for maximum protection, this is something I use. I use a Kali Purple Linux VM. It's been properly configured and snapshots created. So what does that mean? Is I download virtualization software. I can use a VirtualBox or I use VMware, ESX. There's a couple of them that I use. You essentially will download the Kali Purple Linux distribution from their website, and you run that as a virtual machine on your desktop. Now, what you want to do, once you get the virtual machine up, you allocate all the memory to it that you need, especially when you're searching, when you're going through the dark web. It can be really intense and a little slow just because of all the different layers of onions it has to go through. So the experience is underwhelming. But the snapshot allows, if I am dealing with malware or I'm dealing with something that I could get compromised myself on that Linux machine, I can shut it down and snapshot it back to the original configuration. So I build it, create the snapshot, I go and use it. Once I'm done with it and there's a problem, or I've been dealing with something like malware that's potentially dangerous, you go and snapshot it back to original state. So there is no change. There's no chance you can compromise because they can't come out of that virtual machine, and you've snapshot it back to the original. IP address and location. You want to avoid VPNs during account creation. This is where social media platforms flag them with that anti-bot technology they have. So you don't want to be labeled from that. You want to use different IP addresses like Wi-Fi, to different Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi's to mimic real user behavior. It helps to bypass adaptive security controls. And the other one is identify and profile setup. Now, use fictional details for name and identity with no reuse. It doesn't mean come up with somebody you know's name down the street or a family member or something. It's literally fictional. You want to use a different email provider, as we talked about. If phone verification is required, you can use a burner phone or a SIM card to be able to do that. And then you need to make it sound realistic. And the last thing I would do is check and tell your wife that you're doing this so it doesn't like you have an infidelity account going on. Honey, this is my sock puppet. It's made to do for research. It's not some crazy account that I have because I'm having an affair on you. So it's very important to work that out with your spouse. Now, the fourth area of concern, privacy and security settings. We want to adjust those settings for maximum privacy if performance is not an issue, especially if you're using multiple identities and you switch in between them, and you can have different cookies or different settings and so forth that can leak. You want to make sure you have maximum privacy. If conducting passive research, keep the account locked down. If engaging actively, build a deliverable, a believable backstory and follower base before going public. So if you're going to use a Facebook account and you need to build some followers as part of that, you need to build this persona up. You need to be able to spend time in it, has to have a good backstory. And if you're going to actively have to engage this person, not passively research them, you definitely want to make sure you have a believable story. Number 5, profile photo and activity. Use landscape or stock images, crop to remove some of that metadata. Avoid using real people's images to prevent detection. And you can just Google image search things and you can find if this person is real or not. So you want to maintain natural interaction like pages, comments, and engage periodically. That all shows that you're a real person. You're putting likes on things. You're actually using the account as a normal user. And then 6, build that credibility. Gradually add friends to the account. Consider how that backstory aligns with the profile and activity connections. Now, real quick, I'm going to jump into VPNs. The VPN provides a secure connection between an endpoint remote location and, say, the main office. Your ability to connect from home into the main office is usually provided over a VPN. Several different VPN technologies. I'm not going to get into all of them, from PPTP to OpenVPN and so forth. But essentially what you want to know is it's access restricted content. This allows, when you use a VPN, you can get around geo restrictions. If you want to say, I want to see a movie on Hulu that's only allowed in Europe because of licensing, well, you can VPN to Europe. You have a Europe IP address now, and somewhere within Europe, you can now access that resource because the VPN makes you look like you're actually residing in that area. Torrent and throttling, prevent ISP bandwidth throttling. Secure mobile data. Authentication security, and then travel convenience is always a prime example. But when we're talking about the dark web, I use the VPNs to stay safe before going into Tor. That's the key part. VPN to a different country, and then from there, Tor browse in. What are some of the free VPN services that are out there? You can always go to vpnbook.com. It's a website that allows available OpenVPN and PPT connections. You can look over here on the right You can see where they'll tell you the server status. So here's French 200, that's online. Poland, several in the United States. There's a UK proxy, Canadian, and 2 that are online in Germany. And you can see the latest news of what VPN servers came up, which ones got added. And you got to remember, these are coming up and down throughout the day or whatever their frequency is. And it's really to provide that anonymity, to provide you access to resources that you could VPN and protect yourself. So once you've done that, once you've gone to that site, you will download the OpenVPN configuration. When you get here, allow you to download one of these, and then you would import it into the client that's on your Kali Linux machine. You'll check for and prevent DNS leaks. That's coming up here. You can also use proxy chains for other protocols. If you want to be able to use RDP over the dark web, you can do that through things like proxy chains. DNS leak. So a DNS leak can ruin your anonymity by poor configuration and lack of testing. All DNS traffic should be tunneled over the VPN to the provider system and not the locally configured DNS settings of the host. If the Tor circuit was to break, it would reveal your home IP address. So what I love this, a lot of people know how to do IP config /all tells you what your local IP address is. You need to know what your outside IP address is. So when you go to a website and it geolocates you, you need to know what you're coming out as and so forth. You used to be able to just do this. You can still do this. You go, what's my IP address.com, and it'll tell you where your IP address is and what part of the world you're from. Much easier way to do this is there's an application on Linux and on all Microsoft desktops, Windows 10 and 11, called curl. And its job is to make commands or calls out to a website or to an API. So in this case, curl ipinfo.io, and it will bring back a JSON object, and it'll tell you what your IP address is, what city you're in, what region, and so forth. I did this when I was in New Jersey last week for my company's all hand. So once again, curl ipinfo.io can be your best friend. You definitely want to check your leaks by going to dnsleaktest.com. That will tell you if you're showing up and you're having a leak and you have an anonymity problem. Now, the core of this, the gateway to dark web, is through the various layers of this onion, and that is Tor onion routing. So what is Tor? High anonymity, offers near impossible traceability through onion routing technology. It's free and reliable, no dependencies on service provider, and it uses a network of random nodes. Now, some of the disadvantages of Tor is exit node risks. Data can be exposed at exit nodes. Slow speeds, routing through multiple nodes slows down connections, and then data usage consumes significant bandwidth, is unsuitable for metered plans. So if you look up on the top right here, that Tor node tunneling is just showing how over each of the nodes on the Tor network, it's being encapsulated, or one envelope, the message goes into another envelope, which goes into another envelope. So what happens is as it's moving through each of these nodes, it has full protection all the way to the exit node before it goes out. So what does that look like? You can see here, you have a web client, connect to that Tor bridge, usually bounce for two other nodes before out onto one of those dark web servers. Now, this is what a Tor browser looks like. This is the circuit that I've been talking about. This is my virtual machine that I have on the left side. This is snapshot 1. You can see where I'm on this onion site here, on this dark web onion site, and my Tor circuit has me routing through Poland. You'll see it says guard. Then it goes from Poland to the United States to Russia. And so now my IP address is actual Russian. Some of the people are asking, how do you come out looking like you're a Russian IP address? This is exactly how you do this. Now, very difficult to really pick. You're not really able to pick what circuits get set up. You can hit new Tor circuit for this site and it'll generate you a new one, but you just can't pick which ones you want from a middle node to a exit node. You can do that with tools like Proxy Chains 4, where you can actually pick what nodes you go through. A little bit more complicated, but for the most part, make it simple for users. They generate this circuit for you. Now, think about it. If I'm VPN to Canada, and then I'm going to Poland, and then back to the United States, and then back to Russia, and then to wherever site that I'm going to, which is this dark web link for the best dark sites around. You go to this website, right? So for me to go to this Onion site, I go through Poland, United States, and Russia. Now, not very productive at all. You're bouncing around. This is slow. But I at least wanted to highlight how it gives you an IP4 and an IPv6 IP address. Now, would you trust anything you send coming out through a Russian IP address? You just have to assume everything the Russian government is sweeping up, and they're looking at everything you go to. So you definitely will be targeted more in some countries rather than others. This is another topic. I'm not going to get too much into it. You could do some research on it. These are bridges. So Tor bridges essentially are secret bridges where you don't know the IP address. You're going to be told the IP address. It's a landing zone for you to communicate. Really hard to break that. So you also have pluggable transports such as OBF-S4. They rely on the use of these bridges. Like ordinary Tor relays, bridges are run by volunteers. They are not listed publicly, so adversary can't identify them easily. Using bridges in combination with pluggable transport helps to conceal the fact you're using Tor in the first place, but may slow down the connection compared to using ordinary Tor relays. Now, other pluggable transports like Meek and Snowflake are definitely other uses for anti-censorship technology. Now, that pretty much ends that section of the dark web. Definitely want to go on to the next section here. But what does good look like? This will be coming up in the next video. I appreciate having everybody on this one. The next one's going to talk more about PowerShell security hardening. We're going to talk about examples of PowerShell techniques attackers use. Then we're going to talk about the technical depth and business alignment. Okay, this is not technical, but it is business alignment that I see get screwed up so often that I had to include that in this presentation. What that wrong methodology is, I'm going to show you very specifically what a wrong methodology to use looks like. Then I'm going to go over how it all comes together in security operations, how do you make all these functions, these techniques, and so forth. I ran the Cyber Fusion Center for many large customers, and I always thought it was good to show them how we put all this together. Then I talk about the metrics that matter when it comes from an MDR perspective. But now that concludes all my presentation for this podcast. I really appreciate your time and everybody listening. I hope you gathered some good information about incident response, some of the things that we're seeing in different customer sites, what things you want to focus on that have the greatest impact to your organization. Hopefully you've learned a little bit more about the dark web, what's involved, and how to stay safe. And I hope everybody learned something. So stay secure, and I hope you hit that like button, you subscribe, you hit comment, and you join me on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Cybersecurity America on the Voice America Business Channel. We hope you've learned some valuable information to help you be a better executive leader and navigate today's complex world of cybersecurity. Until next week, stay secure.